In the beginning, the world was perfect, a flawless creation fresh from the hands of God. Imagine it, the Garden of Eden, a paradise so lush and vibrant that every flower bloomed in brilliant color, every stream sparkled like diamonds under the sun, and the air was so pure it felt like you were breathing in life itself. The garden wasn't just a place, it was the epitome of divine craftsmanship, where every blade of grass and every creature played its part in a symphony of existence. It was a place of peace, of harmony, where nothing was out of place and everything existed in perfect balance. But what is paradise without a little drama? After all, what's a story without a twist? Just when you think you have the garden all figured out, a world of endless beauty, love, and probably more animals than a National Geographic special, there's something lurking in the shadows, or rather someone. And that someone, slithering through the underbrush, was the serpent. Now I know what you're thinking. The serpent, right? The bad guy? The villain of the piece? Sure, we've all heard the story before, but have we ever paused to consider his side of the tale? What if this wasn't just a simple case of good versus evil, but something far more complex, and maybe even a bit more relatable? Before we delve into the serpent's perspective, let's set the scene a little more. Picture this: Adam and Eve, the first humans living in this paradise. Everything they could ever want or need was at their fingertips. In Genesis, we read about how God planted this perfect garden and placed them in it. There it is, right in the middle of it all, those two trees standing like silent sentinels, one offering eternal life and the other, well, that's where things start to get interesting. Now imagine the garden on an ordinary day. The birds are singing, the animals are roaming freely, and Adam and Eve are just chilling. They've got everything they need, but there's a bit of a caveat. God gave them one rule, just one. It's simple enough, right? Stay away from that one tree. But come on, this is a story, and where there's a rule meant to be broken. Enter the serpent. Now, I want you to picture him not just as some creepy crawly, but as a character with depth, maybe even a little charm. Imagine him with a sly grin, a smooth voice, and just enough charisma to make you wonder, what's his deal? He's not just slithering around aimlessly, he's got a purpose, he's got a plan, and in his mind, it's a pretty good one. But here's where things get a bit murky. Who or what was this serpent? Was it simply an animal that could talk? Was it just an ordinary snake? Or was it something more? Some interpretations suggest that the serpent was a literary symbol for Lucifer, the devil himself, who took on this form to deceive Eve. Others believe it was just a regular serpent, possessed by the devil to carry out this act of temptation. The Bible doesn't spell it out clearly, leaving us with a mystery that has intrigued scholars and believers for centuries. The idea that the serpent was Lucifer is compelling. After all, in Revelation, the devil is referred to as that ancient serpent who leads the whole world astray. But then, why a snake? Perhaps it was the perfect disguise, an ordinary creature that wouldn't raise suspicion, that could move quietly and strike with precision. Or maybe the serpent was simply an animal, one that had been manipulated by a darker force to achieve its purpose. The truth is, we don't know for sure. What we do know is that the serpent was more than just a snake. It was a catalyst for one of the most significant events in human history. And whether it was the devil in disguise, an ordinary animal with extraordinary abilities, or something else entirely, the serpent had a role to play, and it played it well. So there he was, slithering closer, eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and purpose. He knew exactly what he was doing when he approached Eve that fateful day. And as he drew near, you can almost hear the gears turning in his mind. He wasn't just about to offer her a piece of fruit, he was about to offer her a choice, a moment of decision that would echo throughout history, a choice that would reveal something deeper about human nature, about temptation, and about the pursuit of knowledge. He said, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Genesis 3:1. The serpent knew how to frame a question. He knew how to plant a seed of doubt, how to make something forbidden seem not just desirable, but inevitable. And that's where we'll leave it for now, with Eve standing there, the serpent's words hanging in the air like a challenge, like an invitation. What happens next? Oh, you know the story, or do you? Stick around because we're just getting started. And believe me, this tale has a few more twists than you might expect. The serpent was no ordinary creature in the Garden of Eden. Sure, to the casual observer, it might have looked like just another animal, one of many God had created to populate this paradise. But there was something different about this one. It wasn't just the way it moved, slinking effortlessly through the lush foliage as if it owned the place. It wasn't just the way its scales shimmered with an almost otherworldly sheen under the dappled sunlight. No, the real difference was in its eyes and what lay behind them. You see, the serpent wasn't just any snake. It was clever, cunning, and more than a little mischievous. Imagine it as the smooth-talking con artist of the animal kingdom, the kind of character you'd expect to find charming people out of their hard-earned cash in a bustling city market. The serpent had a way with words, a knack for twisting the truth just enough to make it seem more appealing than the reality. And what about its motivations? Let's step into its scales for a moment. What drives a creature like this? Was it boredom, ambition, or maybe, just maybe, it was doing exactly what it was made to do? After all, in every good story, there's got to be an antagonist, right? The serpent saw itself as fulfilling a role, playing a part in a grand narrative that was just getting started. And oh, what a part it was. Now, before we judge the serpent too harshly, let's consider this. To the serpent, tempting Eve wasn't an act of malice. It was more like a game, a test of wit. Picture it grinning slyly, thinking, let's see how sharp these humans really are. Let's see if they're as wise as they're made out to be. The serpent's logic was simple. If knowledge was so dangerous, why make it so tempting? Why put that tree in the garden at all, if not to challenge those who lived there? So there it was, the serpent, feeling every bit as cunning as it looked, ready to make its move. And like any good trickster, it knew that timing was everything. It didn't just slither up to Eve on a whim. No, it waited, watched, and chose the perfect moment to strike. Not with fangs and venom, but with words, with just the right mix of curiosity and doubt. Imagine for a moment the serpent's thought process. It's a bit like a salesperson who knows just how to pitch a product, highlighting the benefits while downplaying the risks. Did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? The serpent might have thought to itself, relishing the clever twist on what God had actually said. Make her think, it mused, make her question, plant the seed of doubt. But it wasn't just about planting doubt. The serpent had a goal in mind, and it was nothing short of revolutionary. To the serpent, this wasn't just about one piece of fruit or one moment of temptation. It was about shifting the balance of power, about proving that humans weren't as infallible as they seemed. It was about showing that even in a perfect world, perfection was a fragile thing, easily shattered with the right nudge. And then there was Eve. The serpent had studied her, watched her interact with the garden, with Adam, and with God. It saw in her the curiosity, the intelligence, the potential. She wasn't just a target. She was the perfect candidate for this little experiment. The serpent's rationale was clear. If anyone could be swayed, it would be her. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong. Strong enough to make her own decisions, even if those decisions led her down a dangerous path. As the serpent slithered closer to Eve, it felt a thrill, the kind of excitement that comes with knowing you're about to make history. Well, herstory in this case. It wasn't just about the act itself, but about the ripple effects it would create, effects that would be felt for generations to come. The serpent wasn't just tempting Eve, it was setting the stage for the entire human drama that would unfold after that fateful bite. But here's the thing, the serpent wasn't purely evil. It didn't see itself that way. In its mind, it was merely offering a choice, opening a door that had been locked. After all, wasn't free will one of the gifts God had given to humanity? The serpent was just facilitating that choice, making sure Eve knew all her options. Was that really so wrong? Or was it just part of a grander design, one that even the serpent couldn't fully comprehend? As it approached Eve, the serpent felt confident, even a little smug. It had a job to do, and it was going to do it well. The plan was set, the pieces were in place, and now it was showtime. "Did God really say?" the serpent began, its voice smooth, almost reassuring. And with those words, the game was on. The serpent knew that what would follow wasn't just a simple conversation. It was a battle of wits, of persuasion, of subtlety. And in this battle, the serpent was more than prepared. It was in its element, ready to play its part in one of the greatest stories ever told. So what happens next? Stick around, because as we dive deeper into this tale, you'll find that the serpent's perspective might just change the way you see the entire story, and perhaps the world around you. The serpent knew this moment was critical. It had to play its cards just right, not too aggressive, not too obvious. Just the perfect blend of curiosity and temptation. And let's be honest, who among us hasn't been tempted by something that's just a little bit forbidden? Whether it's that extra slice of cake or staying up late when you know you have an early morning, we all know the allure of something we're told we can't have. And the serpent? Well, it was a master at this game. Imagine the scene. Eve wandering near the tree of knowledge, probably lost in her thoughts. Maybe she was admiring the beauty of the garden, or perhaps she was pondering something deeper, like why on earth there was this one tree she couldn't touch in a place where everything else was hers to enjoy. And that's when the serpent made its move, not slithering up in a rush, but with a calm, deliberate pace, as if it just happened to be passing by. You can almost hear the serpent's smooth, almost casual voice breaking the silence. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Now here's where the serpent's strategy really shines. Notice that it doesn't outright tell Eve to eat the fruit. No, that would be too direct, too easy to dismiss. Instead, the serpent starts with a question, a simple one really, but one loaded with implications. It's a classic move in persuasion, akin to modern marketing tactics. Think about those advertisements that make you question your choices, like, "Are you really satisfied with your current cell phone?" The serpent plants a seed of doubt, not by stating facts, but by making Eve question what she thought she knew. Eve, caught off guard, responds by clarifying God's command. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.'" Now the serpent sees its opening. It's as if it's been waiting for this exact moment. "You will not certainly die," the serpent replies, with just the right amount of confidence to make Eve reconsider. It's a bold statement, but notice how it's not a direct contradiction. It's more like a gentle nudge, encouraging Eve to see things from a slightly different angle. The serpent continues, "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Here's where the serpent's words pack the most punch. It doesn't just tempt Eve with the fruit, it tempts her with the idea of being more than she is, of gaining wisdom and understanding, of stepping into a new realm of knowledge. It's like a modern-day advertisement that promises you'll be the best version of yourself if you just buy this one product. The serpent isn't selling fruit, it's selling power, enlightenment, the chance to be like God. And let's face it, that's a pretty tempting offer. As the serpent speaks, you can almost imagine Eve's internal conflict. On one hand, she knows what God has commanded, but on the other hand, there's this compelling idea that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story. The serpent isn't just convincing her to take a bite of fruit, it's convincing her to question the very foundation of her reality. And then, the moment of decision. Eve looks at the fruit. It's pleasing to the eye, and more than that, it promises wisdom. In that instant, everything changes. She reaches out, takes the fruit, and eats it. The serpent watches, satisfied, knowing that the consequences of this moment will ripple far beyond the garden. But here's the thing. Did the serpent really win? Or was it just playing its part in a larger plan? Was this all part of the story that had to unfold? The serpent's satisfaction might have been short-lived because, as we'll see, the consequences of this action weren't just about Eve or Adam, they were about the entire world. As we move into the next part of the story, the immediate aftermath of Eve's decision, the tension builds. The serpent might have played its part, but what happens next will shake the very foundation of the world as they knew it. Stick around because the story is just getting started. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The moment the fruit touched Eve's lips, the ripple effect was immediate and profound. The serpent, who had been watching intently from the shadows, must have felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, the perfect execution of a plan that had been slithering in the back of his mind since the beginning. Eve's eyes widened as the knowledge rushed in. And Adam? Well, he didn't take much convincing, did he? One bite later, and the world as they knew it had changed forever. But let's take a step back. What was going through the serpent's mind as he watched this unfold? Was it pure satisfaction or something more complex? Imagine the serpent basking in the immediate success of his persuasion, perhaps even preening a bit as he watched the first couple scramble to cover themselves, suddenly aware of their nakedness. There might have been a moment of smugness. After all, he had just managed to derail God's perfect creation with just a few well-placed words. But then, the gravity of the situation begins to set in, and the serpent realizes that this wasn't just about two humans eating a piece of fruit. This was bigger, much bigger. In those first few moments, the serpent might have felt invincible. But as the realization of what he had set into motion began to unfold, was there a flicker of doubt? Did the serpent truly understand the weight of the consequences that were about to rain down? Maybe he thought he was just stirring the pot a little, shaking things up in the garden. But the aftermath? Well, it was something else entirely. Adam and Eve, now burdened with the knowledge of good and evil, were scrambling to cover themselves with fig leaves, an image that might have brought a cynical smile to the serpent's face. They were no longer the innocent beings they had been moments before. They had changed, and not for the better. And then, God's voice, like thunder, reverberated through the garden. The serpent, knowing what was coming, might have slithered back a bit, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. When God appeared and questioned Adam and Eve, the serpent listened from a distance, observing as blame was passed from one to the other. It was almost comical in a tragic way. Adam pointing at Eve, Eve pointing at the serpent, and the serpent, well, he didn't have anyone to point at, did he? Then came the curse, the one that would change the course of the serpent's existence forever. Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. Genesis 3:14. The serpent, once proud, now condemned to slither in the dust. Was he surprised? Maybe. Perhaps he had anticipated some form of punishment, but the reality of it, being reduced to a symbol of deceit and cursed to crawl in the dirt, was a harsh blow. Did he feel a twinge of regret? Maybe not. But the satisfaction he might have felt initially was surely tainted by the bitterness of his fate. Yet despite the curse, there might have been a sliver of satisfaction left. The serpent had accomplished his goal. He had introduced doubt, temptation, and sin into the world. Adam and Eve were no longer the pure, unblemished beings they once were. They had been cast out of the garden, forced to toil and suffer in a world now tainted by sin. And the serpent? He may have slithered away, knowing that the consequences of his actions would echo through generations, long after he was gone. But what does this mean for us today? Was the serpent's victory a hollow one, or did it set the stage for something even greater? As we move forward, we'll explore the far-reaching implications of this moment and how it continues to shape our understanding of good, evil, and the choices we make. Stick around, because the story is far from over. As the dust settled in the Garden of Eden, the serpent slithered away from the scene, but not without a lingering thought. Was it all really worth it? In the heat of the moment, there was a certain thrill. He had managed to disrupt the divine order, leading humanity's first two members into a decision that would forever change the course of history. But as the consequences began to unfold, the serpent couldn't help but reflect on what he had truly gained and what he had lost. Initially, there might have been a sense of accomplishment. After all, with just a few carefully chosen words, the serpent had managed to turn paradise into a place of loss and regret. He had gotten Eve to question God's command, and Adam had followed along without much resistance. It was a masterstroke of deception, executed with precision. But then, the curses came. And suddenly, the serpent's victory seemed a bit hollow. From that moment on, the serpent's fate was sealed. No longer the clever creature that once moved freely among the trees, he was condemned to slither on his belly, to eat dust all the days of his life. And not just that, he was now locked in perpetual enmity with humanity, destined to be the eternal antagonist in the story of mankind. Imagine the serpent moving through the now changed garden, his mind heavy with these thoughts. Had he fully anticipated this outcome? Or, like many of us when we act impulsively, had he only considered the immediate gain without fully grasping the long-term consequences? This reflection leads us to an important point. How often do we, in our own lives, make decisions that seem clever or advantageous in the moment, only to find ourselves paying a price we didn't expect? Take, for instance, the workplace. You might be tempted to cut corners on a project, thinking it will save time and get the job done faster. Maybe you'll impress your boss in the short term, but what happens when those shortcuts lead to bigger problems down the line? Perhaps the quality suffers, or a critical detail is missed, and suddenly, what seemed like a smart move becomes a costly mistake. Or think about relationships. You might deliver a sharp, witty remark during an argument, feeling victorious in the moment, but that cutting word could linger, causing hurt that lasts far longer than the argument itself, damaging the trust and connection you have with that person. The serpent situation is a stark reminder of this dynamic. He succeeded in his immediate goal, but at what cost? His cunning led to a world where he would forever be viewed as the embodiment of deception and evil, crawling in the dirt, feared and reviled. And what's more, he didn't just alter his own fate. His actions set into motion a series of events that would lead to pain, suffering, and toil for all of humanity. Let's think about the ripple effects of our decisions. Consider the story of King David and Bathsheba. David's decision to pursue Bathsheba seemed, in the moment, like a simple exercise of power and desire. But the consequences were far-reaching. The death of Bathsheba's husband, the loss of their child, and a series of family conflicts that plagued David for the rest of his life. What started as a moment of impulsive action led to heartbreak and tragedy, not just for David, but for those around him as well. Or consider a more modern example, the Enron scandal. Executives at Enron made decisions that initially seemed like brilliant business strategies, inflating profits and hiding debts to keep the company's stock price high. But the deception unraveled, leading to one of the biggest corporate collapses in history. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, their pensions, and their savings. The short-term gain was utterly eclipsed by the long-term devastation. This brings us back to the serpent slithering through the garden, perhaps with a smug smile, but also with the weight of what he had set in motion. He might have anticipated the immediate chaos, but did he foresee the millennia of suffering, the broken relationships, the fear and distrust that would come to define his existence? Did he consider that his actions would not just lead to Adam and Eve's fall, but also to his own eternal downfall? It's easy to act in the moment, driven by a desire to achieve a certain outcome, to win a certain battle. But the serpent's reflection forces us to consider the bigger picture. How often do we pursue our goals without fully weighing the cost? How often do we find ourselves in situations where, like the serpent, we might achieve what we set out to do, only to realize that the victory is far more bitter than sweet? The serpent's reflection is not just a story from ancient scripture, it's a mirror to our own lives. It challenges us to think about the long-term consequences of our actions, to consider the ripple effects that might not be immediately apparent. And as we transition from this reflection, it invites us to look at our own lives with fresh eyes, to see the hidden costs of our decisions, and to strive for outcomes that bring true lasting good. Now let's move on to explore what this ancient story can teach us about the choices we face today and the unforeseen consequences that may follow. In today's world, the choices we face may not seem as monumental as the one made in the Garden of Eden, but they can be just as impactful in shaping our lives and the lives of those around us. Every day we're bombarded with decisions, some small, some significant, that carry weight far beyond the moment we make them. These choices define our character, our relationships, and even our legacy. Consider the choice of how we spend our time. In an age of constant connectivity, it's easy to get lost in the endless scroll of social media, the allure of streaming platforms, or the demands of work that bleed into every hour of our day. But each moment we choose to spend on one thing is a moment taken from something else, be it time with family, personal growth, or simply rest. How often do we reflect on the long-term effects of these seemingly small decisions? Think about the choices we make in our relationships. Every word we speak, every action we take, has the power to build up or tear down. A harsh word spoken in anger can leave scars that last far longer than the momentary release it provides. On the other hand, choosing patience, kindness, and understanding, even when it's difficult, can strengthen bonds and create a foundation of trust and love that endures. In our professional lives, the choices we make can set the course for our future. Do we cut corners to achieve quick success, or do we invest in doing things the right way, even if it takes longer? The decision to act with integrity, even when no one is watching, can have a profound impact on our careers and our reputation. It's easy to be tempted by the allure of shortcuts, but as the Serpent story reminds us, what seems like a clever move in the moment can lead to unforeseen consequences. Then there's the choice of how we handle challenges and adversity. Do we face difficulties with resilience and faith, trusting that God has a plan, even when we can't see it? Or do we give in to fear, frustration, and doubt, allowing these emotions to dictate our actions? The story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting cunning and immediate gain overshadow wisdom and long-term thinking. Another critical choice we face today is how we interact with the world around us. In an age where information is abundant, but often misleading, do we seek truth and understanding, or do we spread misinformation and fuel division? The decision to seek out and share what is true, just, and compassionate can make a world of difference in the lives of others, even if it's not always the easiest path. Let's not forget the choices we make regarding our health and well-being. In a world where convenience often trumps wellness, how do we prioritize our physical, mental, and spiritual health? Choosing to nourish our bodies with healthy food, to exercise, to rest, and to spend time in prayer or meditation may seem simple, but these choices have long-lasting effects on our overall well-being. Ignoring these areas may provide short-term satisfaction, but can lead to significant consequences down the road. Finally, consider the choices we make about our values and the kind of life we want to lead. Every day we're faced with opportunities to act according to our principles or to compromise them for convenience or gain. Do we choose to live authentically in alignment with our beliefs, or do we allow external pressures to shape who we are? The serpent's decision to deceive was a choice that aligned with his cunning nature, but it also sealed his fate as a symbol of evil and betrayal. The story of the serpent and the fall of humanity is more than an ancient tale. It's a mirror reflecting the choices we face in our own lives today. Each choice, whether big or small, has the potential to lead us closer to or further from the life we want to lead. The life that aligns with our values, our faith, and our aspirations. So as we move forward, let's take a moment to reflect on the choices before us. What kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? What story do we want our lives to tell? Let's choose wisely, with the knowledge that every decision we make shapes not just our own lives, but the world around us as well. And now, as we continue to explore the serpent's journey, let's see how these choices unfolded and the profound impact they had on the course of history. So let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. The serpent's actions in the Garden of Eden weren't just a random act of rebellion. No, this slithery character might have been playing a crucial part in a much larger narrative, one that goes beyond the immediate consequences of Adam and Eve's fateful bite. You see, in every great story, there's always a character who seems to cause trouble. But in the end, their actions push the plot forward in ways no one expected. Think about it. Where would Frodo be without Gollum, or Luke Skywalker without Darth Vader? It's the villains and the challenges they create that often lead to the hero's greatest moments of growth and triumph. In the case of the Serpent, could it be that he was more than just the bad guy? Could it be that his role was necessary for the unfolding of a grander divine plan? Let's dive into this intriguing possibility. The serpent's temptation of Eve led to the fall, which in turn introduced sin into the world. But this event also set the stage for the entire biblical narrative of redemption, from the covenants with Abraham and Moses to the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Without the fall, would humanity have ever needed a savior? It's a question that theologians have pondered for centuries. In a way, the serpent's actions can be seen as a catalyst for God's plan to reveal his love, mercy, and justice to humanity. By allowing the fall to happen, God created the opportunity for his grace to shine through the darkness of sin and separation. It's like the serpent unwittingly set the stage for the greatest comeback story of all time. This concept isn't new either. Throughout the Bible, we see God using what seems to be evil for good. Take Joseph's story, for example. His brothers sold him into slavery, an act of pure malice. Yet in Genesis 50:20, Joseph tells them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." The serpent's actions in the garden might just be another instance of this divine irony, where what was meant for harm became the foundation for a greater good. Now, before we start feeling too sorry for the serpent, let's remember that this is still the same creature who brought deceit into paradise. But it's interesting to consider that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the ultimate villain in this story. Maybe he was more like a necessary antagonist, a character whose actions, while undeniably negative, were crucial for the story's development. Think about how this applies to our lives today. How often do we encounter challenges or people who seem to throw our plans off course, only to later realize that these obstacles were actually stepping stones to something greater? Maybe it's a difficult boss who pushes us to develop new skills, or a failed relationship that leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves. In the grand scheme of things, these tough moments often play a pivotal role in our growth and in the direction our lives take. So if we circle back to the serpent, one has to wonder, what did he think of his role in all of this? Did he see himself as a grand strategist, orchestrating the downfall of humanity? Or was he merely a pawn in a much larger game, fulfilling a purpose he didn't fully understand? Maybe, just maybe, the serpent himself was caught off guard by the magnitude of what he set in motion. And isn't that the fascinating thing about life and the stories we tell? Sometimes even the bad guys are part of a much bigger plan, one that's ultimately leading us toward a greater good, even if we can't see it in the moment. And with that, we move back to the serpent's perspective, pondering what it all means in the grand scheme of things. This exploration of the serpent's role invites us to reflect on the complexities of our own lives and the broader narrative that might be at play. Are there serpents in your life that, despite their negative influence, have propelled you toward unexpected growth or new opportunities? As we continue this journey, let's keep in mind that even the most challenging moments can be part of a divine plan, leading us towards something far greater than we ever imagined. Now let's bring this ancient tale into our modern world. The story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden isn't just a distant myth, it's a reflection of the challenges we face every day. While we might not be dealing with talking snakes and forbidden fruit, the essence of temptation is something that's very much alive in our lives today. In our world, the influence of the devil can take on many forms. It might be the subtle voice that encourages us to cut corners at work, to lie just a little to make things easier, or to give in to habits we know aren't good for us. These temptations are often dressed up in appealing packages, just like the fruit in the garden. making them hard to resist and even harder to recognize. Think about it. How many times have you faced a decision where the wrong choice seemed like the easiest or most attractive option? Maybe it was that tempting offer to get involved in a shady business deal, the allure of gossiping about a colleague, or the pull of indulging in something you know isn't good for your body or soul. The devil's influence often sneaks in under the guise of convenience, pleasure, or even necessity. But here's the thing, just like in the Garden of Eden, these temptations often lead us down paths that, in the long run, are anything but beneficial. They might promise immediate satisfaction, but they come with a cost, whether it's to our integrity, our relationships, or our spiritual well-being. So how do we resist these modern-day temptations? How do we stand firm when the serpent's whispers seem so convincing? First, it's crucial to stay grounded in your faith and values. Just as Jesus resisted the devil's temptations in the wilderness by quoting scripture, we too can draw strength from God's word. In James 4:7, we're told to submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. This verse reminds us that resisting temptation isn't just about willpower, it's about turning to God for strength and guidance. Another key strategy is to be aware of the devil's tactics. The devil is often called the father of lies for a reason. His approach usually involves distorting the truth, making something harmful seem harmless or even beneficial. By staying vigilant and discerning, we can recognize these lies for what they are and avoid falling into the traps set before us. And let's not forget the importance of community. Just as Eve was alone when she was tempted by the serpent, isolation can make us more vulnerable to the devil's influence. Surrounding ourselves with a strong, supportive community of faith can help us stay accountable, encourage us to make the right choices, and provide us with the wisdom of others who have faced similar challenges. But here's a dose of reality. Resisting temptation isn't always easy, and it doesn't come with a guarantee that we'll never stumble. We're human after all, and part of our journey is learning from our mistakes and growing stronger in our faith. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, we're reminded that no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. This verse offers a powerful reminder that we're never alone in our struggles. God is always there, providing the strength and the way out we need to overcome temptation. So as we navigate the complexities of modern life, let's keep in mind that the devil's influence is real, but so is God's power to help us resist it. Whether we're facing subtle temptations or outright challenges to our faith, we can take comfort in knowing that with God's help, we can stand firm and choose the path that leads to life, peace, and spiritual growth. And just like the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, our own stories are filled with choices that shape our character, our destiny, and our relationship with God. So let's choose wisely, resist the serpent's whispers, and walk boldly in the light of God's truth. As we reflect on the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, it's important to recognize that sometimes the serpent's whispers don't come directly to us. They come through the voices of others. Just as Eve influenced Adam to eat the forbidden fruit, we too are often influenced by the people around us. This influence can be subtle, pervasive, and incredibly powerful. In our day-to-day lives, we're constantly surrounded by people who can shape our thoughts, decisions, and actions. These might be close friends, family members, colleagues, or even strangers whose opinions we value. While these influences can be positive and uplifting, they can also lead us down paths we never intended to take. Let's be honest. We've all experienced moments where we've made decisions based on someone else's persuasion rather than our own convictions. Maybe it was a friend encouraging us to take a shortcut at work, a loved one pushing us to compromise our values, or even a social media influencer subtly promoting a lifestyle that doesn't align with our beliefs. It's easy to get caught up in the influence of others, especially when we trust them or when their advice seems appealing at the moment. But here's the thing. Just as Eve's influence over Adam led to consequences for both of them, the influences we allow into our lives can have significant repercussions. It's crucial to recognize when someone's advice or example might be steering us away from what we know is right and towards something that could harm us spiritually, emotionally, or even physically. So how do we navigate these influences and ensure that we're making decisions based on our own convictions and God's guidance, rather than just following the crowd? First, it's important to cultivate strong willpower. Willpower isn't just about saying no to temptation. It's about having the inner strength to stand by your values, even when it's difficult. This requires self-awareness, knowing your own weaknesses and being prepared to face situations where you might be pressured to go against what you believe in. By building your willpower, you become less susceptible to the sway of others and more capable of making choices that align with your faith and values. Another key strategy is to surround yourself with positive influences. Just as negative influences can lead us astray, positive influences can help keep us on the right path. Seek out relationships with people who share your values, who encourage you to grow in your faith, and who challenge you to be the best version of yourself. These are the people who will support you when you're faced with difficult choices and who will help you resist the pull of harmful influences. It's also important to set boundaries. This might mean distancing yourself from people who consistently lead you toward negative behavior or making a conscious decision not to engage in conversations or activities that compromise your beliefs. Setting boundaries isn't about being judgmental or cutting people out of your life. It's about protecting your spiritual and emotional well-being so that you can stay true to who you are and what you believe in. Finally, always turn to prayer for guidance. When faced with a decision, especially one where you feel pressured by others, take a moment to pray and seek God's wisdom. Ask Him to reveal the right path and to give you the strength to follow it, even if it means going against the grain. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we're reminded to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This verse encourages us to rely on God's guidance rather than the often conflicting advice of those around us. In modern life, it's easy to be swayed by the voices of others, just as Adam was swayed by Eve. But by strengthening our willpower, surrounding ourselves with positive influences, setting boundaries, and turning to God for guidance, we can resist these pressures and make decisions that honor our faith and lead us toward a life of integrity and purpose. So the next time you're faced with a choice where others are trying to sway you, remember the story of the Garden of Eden and the consequences of following someone else's lead without considering the long-term impact. Stand firm in your beliefs, trust in God's guidance, and choose the path that leads to righteousness, peace, and true fulfillment. In today's world of cinema, we're seeing a fascinating trend: movies that delve into the backstories of well-known villains, giving us a glimpse into their motivations, their struggles, and the events that led them down the path of darkness. Whether it's the tragic transformation of Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader or the twisted journey of the Joker, these stories aim to show us that villains aren't always born, they're made. They attempt to blur the lines between good and evil, making us question who the true hero and villain are. Take the Marvel Universe, for instance. We've seen characters like Thanos, who despite his brutal actions, is driven by a twisted sense of justice. We're made to see his logic, understand his pain, and almost empathize with him. It's as if the filmmakers are asking us, what would you do if you were in his shoes? Would you make the same choices? This kind of storytelling is powerful because it humanizes the villain, turning them into complex characters rather than just one-dimensional antagonists. And in many ways, that's what we've done here today with the serpent, who many believe represents the devil in the Garden of Eden. By exploring the serpent's motivations, thoughts, and the cunning strategy he used to tempt Eve, we've tried to peel back the layers of this ancient villain. Was the serpent merely fulfilling a role in a larger cosmic drama? Was there a twisted logic behind his actions, a desire to reveal the truth hidden from Adam and Eve? Or was it simply an act of pure malice? These are the questions that make us pause and think. In many of these modern retellings, the hero's actions are re-examined from the villain's perspective, making us question whether the hero was truly as virtuous as we believed. What if the story we've always known was told from a biased point of view? What if, just like in these movies, the hero is actually the villain from the perspective of the antagonist? But here's where we need to draw the line. No matter how much we explore the devil's mind, his motives, or his twisted logic, we must remember that his story is not one of misunderstood heroism. The devil's rebellion against God, his deception in the garden, and his ongoing attempts to lead humanity astray are actions rooted in a desire to oppose God's will and goodness. Yes, we can explore his character, analyze his motives, and even understand the why behind his actions. But unlike the anti-heroes of modern cinema, who may have redeeming qualities or tragic backstories, the devil's story is one of ultimate rebellion. And no matter what motive or good guy turned bad guy arc he might have, the truth remains clear. We overcame by the blood of the Lamb. The sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross was the ultimate victory over sin, death, and the devil's schemes. It's a victory that cannot be undone or rewritten, no matter how much the devil might try to twist the narrative. The power of Christ's blood, shed for us, is the final word in this cosmic battle between good and evil. So, while it's intriguing to delve into the mind of the serpent, to wonder about his motives and strategies, let's never forget the conclusion of this story. The devil might have played his part, but he was ultimately defeated. And that, my friends, is the truth that stands the test of time. No matter the twists and turns of the story, we have overcome by the blood of the Lamb. Victory is ours, not because of who we are, but because of who he is. The serpent, a figure so entwined with the very beginning of humanity's story, has slithered through the pages of history, leaving behind a legacy as complex and contradictory as the creature itself. From the moment it entered the Garden of Eden, the serpent became more than just a character in a story. It evolved into a symbol, a representation, and a point of fascination across different cultures and eras. Let's dive into how this humble serpent has been viewed over time, taking on meanings that range from the sinister to the sacred. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the serpent is the ultimate embodiment of evil. It's the creature that led humanity astray, prompting the fall and bringing sin into the world. This image of the serpent as the deceiver has been passed down through generations, ingrained in the collective consciousness as a symbol of treachery and moral corruption. Yet when we look beyond this narrative, we find that the serpent's legacy isn't as straightforward as it seems. Take ancient Egypt, for instance, where the serpent was revered as a symbol of royalty and divine protection. The uraeus, a stylized upright cobra, adorned the crowns of pharaohs, representing their sovereignty and connection to the gods. Here the serpent wasn't a figure of deceit, but a guardian, a protector of truth and order. In Greek mythology, the serpent takes on yet another role as a symbol of wisdom and healing. The rod of Asclepius, entwined by a single snake, has come to represent medicine and healing practices to this day. It's fascinating to see how the very creature that brought death into the world, according to one tradition, is also seen as a bringer of life and health in another. But perhaps one of the most ironic twists in the serpent's legacy is its association with knowledge. The serpent in the garden didn't just offer fruit, it offered enlightenment, a forbidden knowledge that was both a blessing and a curse. Over time, this association has made the serpent a symbol of rebellion, curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge, even if it leads to dangerous consequences. In modern culture, this interpretation has been played out in various ways. Think of how often we see serpents in literature and film, not just as villains, but as complex characters that challenge the status quo. From the snake in the Jungle Book, who hypnotizes with its wisdom, to the cunning yet charming figures in thrillers and dramas, the serpent is portrayed with layers of meaning. It's not just a creature of evil, It's a creature of depth, a symbol of the duality of knowledge and power. Yet, while we can appreciate the serpent's multifaceted legacy, we must also recognize the consequences that came from its actions in the garden. The introduction of sin, the separation from God, and the beginning of human suffering all trace back to that fateful encounter with Eve. So while the serpent may be seen as a symbol of wisdom in one context, it remains a symbol of the cost of disobedience in another. It's almost humorous, isn't it? That a single creature could represent so many contradictory things: evil and protection, death and life, ignorance and enlightenment. The serpent's legacy is like a tapestry woven with threads of both light and shadow, creating a complex picture that continues to evolve with each retelling of the story. As we move from this exploration of the serpent's legacy, it's worth reflecting on what this ancient story means for us today. How do we see the serpent in our own lives? Is it a warning, a challenge, or a symbol of something deeper? Perhaps like the serpent, our understanding of good and evil is not always black and white, but rather a spectrum of choices and consequences that shape our journey. The serpent's legacy, much like the serpent itself, is elusive, ever-changing, and deeply intertwined with our own human experience. As we bring this exploration of the serpent's tale to a close, it's worth asking ourselves, what exactly can we learn from this age-old story? The tale of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is not just a simple narrative about temptation and the fall of man. It's a story rich with layers of meaning, each one offering a unique perspective on the complexities of good and evil, choices and consequences. At its core, the serpent's tale is a cautionary one. It serves as a reminder that the choices we make, no matter how small they may seem at the moment, can have far-reaching consequences. When Eve reached out for that fruit, she wasn't just taking a bite of something forbidden. She was making a choice that would ripple through the fabric of human history. And the serpent? Well, he was the catalyst, the one who set the wheels of fate in motion with just a few carefully chosen words. But this story isn't just about the serpent's cunning or Eve's decision. It's about the complexity of good and evil and how those concepts aren't always as clear-cut as we'd like them to be. The serpent isn't just a villain in the traditional sense. He's a figure that challenges us to think deeper about the nature of temptation, the allure of knowledge, and the consequences of our actions. In some ways, the serpent represents the part of ourselves that is curious, that wants to know more, even if that knowledge comes at a cost. So what does this mean for us today? In our own lives, we are constantly faced with choices, many of which come with their own serpents whispering in our ears. Whether it's the temptation to take the easy way out, to cut corners, or to seek out forbidden knowledge, the story of the serpent reminds us that these choices can lead us down paths we might not be ready to walk. But it also teaches us that while we may be tempted, we are not powerless. We have the ability to choose, to resist, and to seek out what is right and true. The serpent's story is also a reflection of the complexities of life itself. Just as the serpent was not entirely evil, neither are the choices we face always black and white. Life is full of gray areas, and it's in those gray areas that we must navigate with wisdom, discernment, and faith. As we reflect on this story, it's important to remember that the tale of the serpent isn't just a story about the past. It's a story about us. It's about the choices we make every day, the temptations we face, and the consequences that follow. It's a story that challenges us to look at our own lives and ask ourselves, what would we do if we were in Eve's place? How would we respond to the serpent's whispers? And so, as we conclude this journey into the serpent's perspective, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on your own life. What temptations are you facing? What choices lie before you? And how can you navigate these challenges with wisdom and faith? If this story has sparked new thoughts or questions for you, I'd love to hear about it. Share your insights in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation together. And if you've enjoyed this exploration of a familiar story from a new perspective, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content that dives deep into the mysteries of the Bible and beyond. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're always in the loop when new stories drop. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, remember, every choice we make writes the next chapter of our story. Choose wisely, stay curious, and keep seeking the truth.